Okay, now we are online. Hello, everyone. Hello, Scott, and hello, Mike. My name is Alex. I'm a regular Serbian guy interested in geopolitics. This is my third interview with Scott Ritter and my first with Mike Mihajlovic. Scott Ritter is a former weapons inspector, intelligence officer, book author, and a proud Marine. Um, since I'm interviewing Mike the first time, I go through a few highlights of his CV. He's a former artillery, air defense, and intelligence officer of the Serbian army, and later he served in the Canadian army as well. He has a Master of Engineering degree with specialization in mechanics, automation, and computer science. He's a licensed professional engineer, and he's a book author of many great military books, of which are many about air defenses. I will put Scott's books and Mike's books later in the description box in YouTube. There you can order it. Thank you both for joining my interview today. Today I have two main topics, the situation in Ukraine and the situation in Serbia and Kosovo. So let's start with Ukraine. One thing I want to mention before that I assigned several questions to certain people, but feel free to always jump in and add your opinion or start a discussion with each other. I would appreciate it. So let's start with Ukraine. My first question goes to Scott. First, I'm going to create a scenario, and then I will ask questions about this scenario. So the scenario is Ukraine is suffering horrendous losses. A few weeks ago, Ukrainian defense officials were mentioning that some 200,000 fighting troops were left. The pace of the grinding only increases recently, especially in places like Bakhmut. So Scott, you often mentioned these sheep-dipped Polish soldiers. I have two questions with this regard. First, how should we imagine the process? Are these regular Polish soldiers that receive the order to change clothes to Ukrainian ones and go to the front line? Or are these ideological volunteers? I'm finding it hard to imagine that one could be sent to an illegal mission abroad without agreeing to it.
The honest answer is I don't know. I mean, I can speculate, but I don't know. I would say this: the more that you see unit cohesion, the more you see sound tactics, the more you lean towards these being sheep-dipped Polish soldiers. If you see individualism, if you see people who lack, basic company level tactical understanding, I think we're leaning towards ideologically motivated people. My understanding is that the Polish formations are fighting with a level of unit cohesion. So the implication is that these are people who have trained together and prepared for war together. Whether they did this as a Polish unit that has been transferred in total, or what I think is more likely, part of a covert program run by the Polish intelligence services that seeks volunteers from within the ranks of the Polish military to be sheep-dipped, brought together, and then trained, people who are already trained in the basics, but brought together as a unit. They trained together briefly as a unit before being sent over. But I think that these Polish contingents are people that have a modicum of military experience and are organized to fight as military units. And that organization came from Poland, not from Ukraine.
Okay, I see. Many people are considering 4 scenarios with regards to the Polish troops. I will read them, and maybe you can give your opinion a bit about this. The first one, keep pouring them sheep dipped into the front lines to fill the gaps. Second, to officially occupy Western Ukraine. Third, to guard the border in case the Ukrainian army collapses and try to flee over the border along with scores of civilians. Fourth, pin Russian troops in Belarus down for any eventuality. What are your thoughts on this?
Is this to me or to Mike?
This is the first block is for you. It's it's for you.
Okay. Well, I would throw in another one, which is to develop a cadre of Polish soldiers who are experienced in ground combat operations against the Russian enemy. Let's remember that Poland has no combat experience. I mean, there's some special forces that fought in Iraq. The people have participated here and there, but it's a peacetime army with zero combat experience. If you take that army and you plan on eventually conducting combat operations against Russia, which has been hardened through 10 months so far of brutal combat and becoming increasingly hardened going forward, it would be very much a one-sided battle. So I think you're blooding Russian or Polish troops. You're getting them out there. They're getting experience in the reality of war. And remember, you don't need them to be 100%. Let's say I take 100 guys and I get them blooded in combat. I can break them up and come back and form five 100-man groups using 20 as the core around which I bring others in. That 20 will influence and be able to guide, et cetera. So it's a force multiplier. So I think that's first and foremost what's going on. Second, I'm not going to be dismissive of filling the gaps, but if your job is to blood your troops, you don't want to kill your troops. So I don't think the Polish are going to be too keen about putting these resources into meat grinders like Bakhmut, which is a one-way ticket. You need experience to be gained. Yes, some people will die, some people will be wounded, but overall, you want the majority of your troops to survive. So I discount the idea that this is a desperate measure to plug the gap. I do believe that these are forces that could, in a critical point in time, be used to rapidly secure Western Ukraine, because they're already in Ukraine, and that at a given moment they can transition into being Polish troops there on the ground and seize control of critical lines of communication, bridges, etc., if needed. That scenario plays into what you talked about, helping prevent a massive wave of Ukrainian refugees and indeed defeated Ukrainian soldiers into Poland. I believe one of the Polish objectives is to keep the war in Ukraine from spreading into Poland, and that the best way to do this is to, I think one of the biggest threats is refugees, unconstrained movement of refugees towards Poland. And at some point in time, the Polish are going to make an argument for the creation of a humanitarian zone in Western Ukraine. And I believe that these troops could be help create the de facto reality of this zone. So rather than mobilizing troops and sending them into Ukraine, these troops are already in Ukraine. Yeah, we're both dying on air.
Yeah,
I'm still not coughing.
Yeah, Mike's the healthy one. You're going to be the only one standing by the end of the show. But I think these troops could be used to create. I don't think there's enough troops to seize all of Western Ukraine. I do think there's enough troops to stabilize Lvov, perhaps, and also to create this humanitarian corridor on the Ukrainian Polish border that's a de facto reality that would make Russia think twice about moving in. The moment Poland moves to seize all of Western Ukraine is the moment Belarus invades. Belarus has made it clear that they have no intention of going into Ukraine unless certain red lines are crossed. And one of those red lines is a Polish effort to take control of Western Ukraine. Belarus won't allow that. There's now a joint grouping of forces that put teeth to the Belarusian threat. But I think that's what we're looking at here. The most important thing is to blood the troops, to get the combat experience. And the second thing is to be prepared to take limited action in Western Ukraine to secure Polish national security objectives, especially as it relates to the possible creation of a humanitarian zone for Ukrainian refugees to keep them out of Poland.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you can always add something if you want.
Yeah, I would like to add a few things. Scott, I agree with you 100%. Definitely, there is a presence of Ukrainian regular troops in Polish regular troops in Ukraine. There's some statements from the Ukrainian soldiers on the front line near Bakhmut. They're talking about Poles coming with their crab self-propelled guns, shoot at the Russian positions, then Russian counter battery fire, basically, which is very fast. They open fire to Ukrainian positions. In the meantime, Poles are already gone. Shoot and scoot tactics. So the blunt of Russian revenge for that sharing is coming upon Ukrainians. So there is not even cohesion between Poles and Ukrainians on some parts of the front, because they're simply troublemakers, to say very plain words, because they provoke Russian side, and Russian counter battery fire is fierce. So they also simply fire on the position where they detected the presence of Ukrainian or any self-propelled guns, and the burden is on Ukrainian troops. Basically, they got their nose blooded with that. Also, of course, they will have experience, and Polish special forces like the Grom unit. Yeah, they're there. Some components of that special unit, they're there definitely. Now, are they taking participation in the combat? Likely, some of them. More is training of the Ukrainian special forces, and as Scott said, they're there to secure Lviv and some surrounding areas, like key components, key infrastructure objects. In the case that Poland want to take that part of Ukraine, which they basically put a claim. That part was always in Austro-Hungary. Then it was in the Polish state. Yeah, so that definitely there is a foreigners. Now, are they volunteers, quotes, or contractors for money? That is questionable. But obviously, they fight they have a cohesion in those lines. So those people are trained together. They're fighting together. So I don't think that they're just volunteers pick up on the railway station and go there and put into Ukrainian uniforms and go to fight. This is those units. They are trained units. Crews or for artillery system, air defense systems. They're trained. You need years to train those kind of people. So they are not just randomly picked up. Some of them are probably contractors. The system like resigned from the military for a certain period of time to go there as a volunteer. Many people from Canada are doing that. I know a few guys who are Ukrainian regions. They went there and traces are lost. They're considering as missing. So yeah, definitely they're professional soldiers under the control of their governments, and they're involved in this war.
That's a very interesting perspective as well. Thank you. So the next question block is for you, Mike. But Scott, feel free to add. So, Mike, you wrote several books about air defenses. Here is my first question block for you. Russia seems to have started ever more attacks on the Ukrainian air defenses. For example, during the large missile attack on the 31st of December. Is it a realistic scenario that Russia is able to degrade the Ukrainian air defense capabilities in such a way that it will be able to use its aviation over a larger part of Ukraine? Today, Russia's planes are, as it seems, only operating over the Donbass, or will the constant delivery of air defense assets keep Ukrainian skies closed for aircraft until the end of the operation?
Well, the first thing, Ukrainian air defense is a mixed match of everything. This is the old Soviet equipment inherited from the Soviet Union, which is 30 years old. Equipment is old, missiles are old. All of that stuff need a maintenance. And I've been in Ukraine a few times before the war, and I know that the state of those units and equipment. They have quantities, but some of those missiles or equipment is simply not reliable. Now, a lot of that equipment is actually damaged or destroyed during the earlier phases of the war. So what that means? West, they're now basically dumping whatever is unwanted in their arsenals and filling Ukraine with the stuff like NASAMS, IRIS-T, hundreds, even thousands of Stingers and Polish Urina and all, and whatever they can dig from their storages. Air defense, Ukrainian on the paper, Ukrainian air defense looks strong, but this is the war of attrition. Russia is basically grinding them slowly but steady. What that means? When Russia prepared the attacks, they will first try to provoke air defense to shoot, to engage drones, which are used basically as a target. So they can even now they're starting to use the old cruise missiles. They remove the warheads which are intended for the nuclear attacks. They put ballast, 300-400 kilos, and they just shoot them. To provoke Ukrainian air defense to engage them so that they can locate their positions. Then the next wave will be attack drones that will basically engage the specific targets. And after that, it's coming the anti-radiation missiles from the long-range anti-radiation missiles from the Russian planes. Russia still doesn't have entire control of the sky over Ukraine, but it's slowly but steady going there. That stuff that wonder weapons like NASAMS that will protect completely everything, it's simply not true because, see, air defense, it's a layer. It's a layered stuff. You need a medium, long range, SHORADs, and also point defense. So all of them, they cover each other. If they don't cover each other, the enemy, the opponent will exploit that stuff. So Ukraine as a country is huge. So what they can do with all of those received assets, they can basically put them around some strategic object, like nuclear power plants. Kiev is a huge city, Dnipropetrovsk, what they call that, Lviv, but they can't protect the whole territory of Ukraine. Russia can engage at any moment anything they want, and it will follow with the waves of decoys, then waves of drones, then the waves of anti-radiation missiles. The other thing that all of that Western equipment, which was dumped into Ukraine, in my opinion, Ukraine is turning into the biggest dumpster in Europe, actually in the world, for unwanted equipment from the West. That equipment is sophisticated. They need a training. Now they're talking about the Patriot system. I mean, Patriot, it is excellent system for the U.S. concept of warfare, that you have dominance in the airspace, you have superiority. But in Ukraine, one battery is worth like one drop in the lake, one drop of water in the lake. I mean, they can protect just 70 kilometers top maximum around Kiev, but not even that. One battery is nothing. 10 batteries is nothing. They need 20 battalions. Each battalion will be, let's say, 3 to 4 batteries. For that, they need the people. See, air defense. This is symbiosis of equipment, crew, and tactics. Equipment is there. They can deliver the equipment. Reliability of that equipment is questionable. Some of them are just maybe new, but most of them are, as I said, unwanted stuff from the storages. So that equipment need to be, they need to bring that equipment on the site. Tactics, it's a multi-layered defense. People, that's the biggest problem, because you need to train people. It's not something that, it's not AK-47 that you give to somebody and after half an hour, it's already proficient in that. It needs many years of training. For instance, I read some manuals for Patriot talking about 50-something weeks of, not even that, or 20-something weeks of training. This is just to get a little bit familiarity what is in that system, but to maintain that system, to repair the system when it's necessary, for that the time is necessary. So you need to have people who are trained to do that stuff. There is no training facilities in Ukraine to do that. There is no maintenance facilities in Ukraine to do that. So all of those ex-Soviet factories that Ukraine, let's say, upgrade a little bit, they're gone. They're hit. Tools, all that stuff is gone. So the NATO, they need to bring all of that tools, equipment, and also train the technicians to do the maintenance, to train Ukrainian staff. It's basically non-combat portion of help, but also we talk about that Polish guys that fight in Ukraine. NASAM, Savisti, Patriot, they will be managed by contractors or completely Western crews, because they already have experience with that. The other thing is a combat experience. I saw, and you guys probably saw too, there's a many instances when they fire on the incoming Russian missiles or drones, and they miss, and they slam into the civilian buildings. That is organization. They put those kind of equipment inside the large cities, and from time to time it's going to happen. It's simply equipment, and especially with the older Soviet stuff, which are not maintained for 20 years, chances to launch and hit the building are actually bigger than to launch and hit the airplane or missile. This stuff is also very expensive. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So imagine one Geran drone or a Shahid drone, which costs $22,000, engaged with a Patriot, which costs a few $100,000, or NASAMS that is $150,000. It is going to bankrupt supplies because the Western supplies are limited. They can supply for some time. There is no more sources also to supply to outsource Russian equipment. There's a few launchers in Greece, a few launchers in Bulgaria, for instance, S-300. Finns, they have some books, but that's it. Once when those missile stocks are launched, used, AD is gone. They can only rely now on the manpads or something that they can maybe try to produce locally. But as I said, facilities are damaged. And also a lot of people simply gave up and tried to leave Ukraine. That's because there is no work. There is no facilities to working. It is very hard for Ukrainian AD, and the Western media, they're trying to push that they're winning, they're shooting down hundreds of objects, hundreds of targets. But let's say that many of those targets are just decoys. And once when Russia established the superiority over the medium to high altitudes, they can use their bombers to do precise targeting with the dump, with all the bombs. They developed a computer, special computer, which precisely calculate the moment when the bomb will be dropped from the airplane. So they can utilize those kind of bombs. And if they have control of the medium to high altitudes, Ukrainians only can hate them. There is nothing they can do. Time is not working for Ukraine. Air defense need the time to train, to integrate all of that. They need to basically to build from the scratch. Now it's a mixed match of everything. Imagine put a bunch of tools in the metal can, a metal bucket, and that's basically Ukrainian air defense now. Some working from time to time, but chances that they can turn anything in their favor, very, very small.
Okay, I see. Yeah. The next short question is, do you think that Ukraine is, so Mike, but Scott, you can answer as well. Do you think that Ukraine is currently using all its air defense assets, or are they holding back air defense assets in case that the Russian aviation starts to fly over Ukraine? Because if we consider that these missiles are hitting their targets anyway, maybe they holding back assets.
No. they may have some equipment which is, let's say, for the repairs or maintenance, but they put the stuff which is whatever they can put in the field, whatever they can put around those strategic objects. Yeah, it's outside. There's no point for them to keep stuff in reserve, because they need to do whatever they can to try to intercept Russian attacks, either from drones or airplanes, cruise missiles, and the point is that they're running low on supplies. So there is nothing that they can actually keep in storages. Bear in mind that even if they have some quantities of available missiles, Russian intelligence is following that very, very closely, and almost every day there's some of the storages, warehouses are hit. So that is Russians are basically depleting them of the missile stocks. After without missiles, it's just a pile of steel.
Okay.
So they need constant supplies, and they don't have that luxury to keep, let's say, 30% of all equipment just in case, because that just in case was in February, and it didn't finish yet.
Yeah.
I would just point out that there's a lot of sometimes in the West we mirror image our tactics onto Russia, and it's just the wrong thing to do. Russia's in no rush to clear Ukrainian airspace. They can hit, and I think Mike said this earlier, there's not a target in Ukraine that can't be struck accurately by precision-guided munitions that are already being employed by Russia. An Su-34 or 35 dropping a laser-guided bomb is going to achieve the same result as a caliber missile. Unless, of course, we're dealing with a hardened target or something like that, but then Russia has specific missiles, the Iskander, et cetera, that can take that out. So there's no rush for Russia to come in and clear the airspace so the Air Force can come in and do the thing. Russia has designed its approach with long-range strike weapons from the air and the ground. So
absolutely,
a lot of the Ukrainian air defense is redundant, meaning it's not being used because the Russians aren't challenging it, because the Russians don't want to challenge it. They don't need to challenge it. And then I'll just reinforce what Mike said about integrated air defense. And integrated air defense only works if the systems can be integrated. If they have to be able to talk amongst one another. Data has to be shared. This works, for instance, if you have old Soviet era equipment and you're integrating it, the equipment was designed to be integrated, meaning there's compatibility of communications, compatibility of radars, systems can talk together. They have command structure built to absorb all the data, bring it into a singular picture. Now you try to append onto that a NASAMS. They don't talk to each other. They don't communicate with each other. They're incompatible, which means there's no integration taking place. And it means that the NASAMS will have to be employed as a separate standalone system, which makes it horribly inefficient. As Mike said, when you're a standalone system, if you're not integrated, you're just sitting out there like ripe fruit ready to be plucked. And this is why you see the high level of destruction that's taking place amongst the Ukrainian air defenses and the lack of efficiency. NASAMS hasn't proven to be an effective system because it can't integrate with anything. I would say the same holds true with the German, IRIS-T. It's just not doing anything. And the Patriot won't do anything either because they can't be integrated. They'll be standalone. They'll be vulnerable. They'll be isolated. They'll be picked off. They'll be eliminated. So, maybe Mike disagrees, but I just think that the Ukrainian air defense is it's a losing proposition. They don't have the time, the resources, or the ability to create from scratch the kind of integrated air defense system. We would have to take this out to White Sands Missile Test Ground or out at Fort Bliss or something and spend years working to integrate systems, design new communication infrastructure, etc., to make this work. Ukraine can't do it on the ground where every mistake made is the death of Ukrainian service members, because every time they make a mistake, Russia kills them with counter battery fire, as you said, long-range anti-radiation missiles, etc. And the burn rate is unimaginable. It takes a long time to train a good air defense artillery person, and when you kill them and they're all dying, what do you replace them with? So the burn rate for air defense professionals is much greater than the replenishment rate. So Ukraine's just getting worse and worse every day. Even when you bring in new systems, you're actually, in many cases, the introduction of a new system weakens Ukraine's air defense, doesn't strengthen Ukraine's air defense.
Exactly. They're just mixing everything and trying to achieve some kind of how they call superiority in air defense, but no, it doesn't work in that way. Simply doesn't work. It's working for media. Of course, if you go to Fox, CNN, it's working perfectly, or Canadian CBC or CP24. Yeah, everything is fine. But in reality, everything is opposite, actually.
Okay. Thank you. The next block goes to Scott. You mentioned recently in the interview with a Serbian TV channel that if Russia loses, the whole world would lose. I would even add it would end in a nuclear disaster. I think everyone is aware of it and everyone calculating with an eventual Russian victory. The point is only to put as many or as much damage as possible to Russia before that happens. But Russia is taking casualties in the process, and I would say not small ones, even though not comparable with the Ukrainian ones. Is there a point where we would see a major escalation by the Russians when the casualties rise too high before the conclusion of the war? I make now something up. Let's say the West keeps feeding sheep troops into Ukraine before it collapses for example, in big cities to prolong the war and make it extremely bloody and whatever. Is this a realistic scenario? And what kind of escalation steps would we expect to see?
I don't believe that there's. I don't believe the West has the capability of conducting the kind of escalation that you're talking about for a number of reasons. One, it's resource intensive and there's just not the resources there to do this. Two, the West is also not anxious to commit suicide. So any escalation with Russia would have to be carefully managed to avoid the potential of nuclear conflict. And then the last one is the West already escalated. I mean, has everybody forgotten what happened in April, May, June, July, August, leading up to the offensives in September and October and November? Did we forget about this? It only happened because the West escalated, because the West provided tens of billions of dollars of direct military assistance, because the West provided intelligence information, logistics support, operational planning, thousands of mercenaries. And I'm not talking about the scrubs that came in the first days and weeks of the war. I'm talking about professional military operators who, were hired by, professional, by military contractors who are functioning as standalone units, carrying out, some of the reconnaissance and the initial assault forces are done by mercenaries, thousands of them. So the West has already escalated. What more can the West do? And let me put it this way. The West failed. The escalation failed. Because where are we today? If you think for a moment that Kharkov will not be Russian again, then I'd like to know what brand of weed you're smoking, because that's one hell of a high. If you think that the right bank of Kherson will not be Russian again, if you think that Russia will not retake the totality of the territories of Kherson, Zaporizhia, of Donetsk and Lugansk, that Russia will not push the Ukrainian forces back 150, 200 kilometers away from that border to ensure that no Ukrainian artillery will ever again strike Mother Russia. If you don't think that Russia, by doing this, will go ahead and take all of Kharkov and absorb Kharkov into Russia, you're wrong. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen because Russia defeated the NATO intervention. Russia gave up territory, preserved lives, and inflicted unimaginable casualties on the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have no reserves left, none, zero, nothing. Meanwhile, Russia is finalizing its mobilization and training of the 300,000 reservists that they mobilized. About 75, 80, 90,000 of them have already been introduced into the front lines. They've been absorbed by existing units, and they've stabilized the defenses. There will be no more Ukrainian offensive victories. They may take a village here, they may take a village there, but no deep penetration operations. And any village they take will result, as Mike alluded to the instant death of everybody involved as Russia brings to bear its extraordinarily superior artillery force to grind them into nothing. Sometime by the end of this month, the final 125, 150,000 Russian troops that are being trained, not as individual replacements, but as cohesive combat units equipped with the most modern Russian equipment, advanced T-90, T-80, T-70 tanks, new self-propelled artillery, new armored fighting vehicles. These units will arrive on the battlefield, and when they do, they will initiate offensive combat operations. Ukraine has nothing to stand up to them. This is 10 to 15 division equivalents of men coming into the battlefield, and Ukraine has nothing to stand up. So I think we're going to see a situation where, Russia is going to be dominating the battlefield in the very near future. Now, is Russia going to suffer losses? Yes. Offensive military operations are very expensive, especially when you go up against an enemy that has shown the level of resilience and capability that the Ukrainians have. Ukrainians are dying in large numbers, but let no one denigrate their courage. The courage of the Ukrainian forces is unmatched. They are very skilled. Just because you're getting blown up by enemy artillery doesn't mean you're not a skilled warrior. There's not much you can do when you have a battery 6 land on your position. You're going to die. But the Ukrainians have proven that if Russia makes a mistake, Ukraine will kill them. We saw that with School 19. Russia made a mistake, put too many people in one place near the front lines, and the HIMARS targeted it and killed them. Russia will continue to make mistakes. All military makes mistakes. There's no military that's perfect. And as you begin offensive operations, the possibility or probability of mistakes being made is great. Units will outrun their flanks, and the enemy may be able to isolate and cut off a tank company here, an infantry company there, and kill them. Command post may get caught up in a crossroads, and HIMARS will come in and slaughter them. The Russians are going to lose thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, hundreds of armored fighting vehicles. It is going to be a bloodbath for Russia. Ukraine, on the other hand, is going to lose tens of thousands of men, maybe even 100,000 men. They're going to lose hundreds of tanks. This is going to be a bloody, bloody, bloody fight. Russia knows this. Russia's prepared for this. This isn't going to take Russia by surprise. So I don't believe there's a threshold that's going to be crossed that causes Russia to deviate from the plan. Russia has a plan of action. They're realistic about war, and I believe Russia is going to implement this plan and achieve their objectives. Thousands of people are going to die. That's what people need to understand. This isn't just because we say Russia is dominant doesn't mean that Russia doesn't suffer losses. Let's take a look at, people today, sort of laugh. Russia's, it's a 10-to-1 casualty advantage for Russia. Okay, think about that for a second. Let's say Russia is inflicting 800 casualties, 800 dead on the Ukrainians a day. That means 80 Russians are dying. In Vietnam War, the spirit of the American people were broke when we lost 200 men a week. If Russia's losing 80 men a day, multiply that by 7, and that's 500 and let me 864. Yeah, 580 dead a week. A week. That's more than double the threshold that broke the American spirit in Vietnam. And this is before they get into large-scale offensive operations. So Russia is already suffering horrific losses on the battlefield. Horrific losses. Losses that no Western nation other than Ukraine has experienced in modern times. Okay? Nobody's lost this number of troops except the Ukrainian military. So the Russians, it's not going to shock them to suffer more. Russia's prepared for it. They know what's about to happen. Hopefully they can minimize stupid mistakes like School 19, but you can't eliminate the fact that war is hell. And when you're fighting a capable opponent like the Ukrainians, who have been given the most modern equipment and provided with real-time intelligence from NATO and the United States, if you make a mistake, you will die. Even if you don't make a mistake, they are capable defenders and they're going to exact a price. This is why historically you want to attack with a 3-to-1 advantage, in military operations. Russia will be able to achieve roughly this now that they've reinforced. But 3-to-1 advantage doesn't mean you don't suffer losses. Look at World War II, the big battles that were fought. The casualty differentials tended to be, about 1 to 1.2, meaning that the Germans and the Soviets are fighting. For every German killed, 1.2 Soviets are killed. We focus on the Germans losing 900,000 men, and we say, oh, great Soviet victory, but the Soviets lost more than 1 million men achieving that victory. I don't think that that's going to happen in this case. I think the casualty ratios will continue to be, in favor of Russia, but they're going to drop. Positional warfare gives Russia a distinct advantage in terms of their artillery. Maneuver warfare, that advantage dissipates somewhat, especially if you have to take hard points. So I think you're going to see the Russian casualty ratio diminish to maybe 1 to 4, 1 to 5. For every dead Russian, 5 Ukrainians. But let's say the Russians kill 20,000 Ukrainians, which they're going to do on the first day or the second day. But if it's a 1 to 5 ratio, 20,000 mean Russia suffered 4,000 dead. This is why School 19 doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. It's sad for the 96, the families of the 96 dead. But it's from the big picture, it's nothing, because there's going to be a big war, ladies and gentlemen, a big war. And it's going to cost Russia so much, but it's going to cost Ukraine more. That's it.
Yeah, I would just want to add, Ukraine can achieve some tactical victories. When I say tactical, just battery or company level, maybe up to battalion level. And that will be it. That's it. That's it, because strategic victories, there is no more penetrations or deep attacks like Izium and that stuff. It's done. Since General Surovikin took control, that guy is a really, really capable and competent leader. So, and I agree with Scott 100%. Russia is going to attack, and the major fight will be on the east. After, let's talk about a hypothetical situation. Once when the lines in Donbass are broken, Ukraine doesn't have depth, fortified depth, because everything is plain up to Dnieper River. So what are they going to do? Are they going to keep a few villages on the way? Bear in mind that in Donbass there is villages, towns, cities every 10 kilometers. So it's relatively easy for the defender to fortify that stuff. Once when that line or those lines are broken, there is nothing to hold Russian troops to Dnieper. So natural barrier, and that fight on the east will decide the war. Ukrainians, I read somewhere, they're talking about imminent offensive on Melitopol and getting to the Azov Sea. I don't know who wrote that. It was some general or whatever, and I just asking myself how he progressed up from the corporal, because it's physically it's not impossible. One of the retired U.S. generals that is now payroll to CNN or one of those big medias. So yeah, Russia will have a casualties. They will suffer casualties, but doctrinally, they are prepared to do that. They prepare their troops. They prepare their public. They have they will do the grinding. It's a deep operation tactics. It's not like a pincer movement, break the enemy in 3 days. There, it's a doctrine that was from 1936, I think, or something like that, when Colonel Trandafilov wrote that stuff together with Marshal Tukhachevsky. But every army fight with according to the certain doctrines, and Scott is absolutely right when he said that we are trying to explain the Russian stuff according to the Western strategy and tactics. It's a different stuff. It's a two different situations, two different views. So Russia is fighting according to their doctrine, and all of this is planned. And now they have a competent chief who is going to do the stuff, who is going to try to protect his troops. They will suffer casualties, maybe one fifth of the Ukrainian casualties. But Russia has reserves, and not only human reserves. There's material reserves. There's somebody on the Western media spoke about Russia is running out of ammunition or whatever. I mean, if any one of them even step once in one of the thousands of Russian warehouses with the shells, for instance, 152 millimeter shells, there's a millions of tons of that stuff available. They can shoot for years without even producing the new stuff, and their industry is geared now for the full-scale war. And Russia, for now, they fought with one hand in glove and one hand tied behind their back. Now it's off. Now they took off their glove and they will fight with both hands. And we'll see. Winter is coming. Winter. It will be winter offensive, but it will be according to the Russian terms. General Surovikin, he is not in Russia. They slowly but steady grinding Ukrainian military. And that was the plan. Russia said in the beginning they're going to demilitarize Ukraine, and they're doing that.
Yeah.
Our media here in the West, we're just talking about Ukrainian victories here and there. Yeah, but they would not achieve that if Russia didn't do certain things. On the tactical level, it will be some victories, like ambushes on the company of tanks or infantry or whatever is there. But in the global picture, it's a pretty grim situation for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they will not negotiate peace. That's the biggest problem, because there is nobody to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of money is invested in that stuff. So those who give the money, they will not allow that. It's not about the Ukrainian military politicians. They're just doing what they were told to do. It's almost like in the football, you know. The quarterback is doing stuff that the coach tells him. The rest is doing what the quarterback tells them to do. So, yeah, Ukraine is not. They will not negotiate, but they can acknowledge the defeat. So, unfortunately, it will be many more casualties, and the Ukraine that we know before this war will be completely different. If Ukraine is a country survive, and that is the question. Some part will survive probably, but what will be after, we'll see.
Okay. Thank you. So the next one, sorry. This flu. Okay, the next question is for both of you. You can pick it up, whoever wants it, because you are both artillery officers. So it fits for both of you. It is about logistics. Logistics is everything in a war. What do you think is the current state of the Ukrainian logistics system to sustain its troops on the various front lines, especially if some new front line would be opened? Is it being degraded by the Russians currently, and why is it still in place? So whoever wants to answer.
Well, I'll give it a stab, and then Mike can correct me. I think we need to understand that there's two logistical systems at play. One is the logistical system that was in place servicing the Ukrainian military prior to the invasion. The other is the logistical system that has been built to handle the infusion of tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment that has been provided by the West to Ukraine. And the two have been melded together where necessary, but they're separate systems. One is managed by the Ukrainian military, using Ukrainian logistic systems, etc. And it is known to the Russians. The Russians have been fairly effective in degrading it. The other is managed by the CIA paramilitaries and Joint Special Operations operators from the American Special Forces who are brought in, and their job is to defeat Russian surveillance. So they are plugged into American intelligence that is telling them about Russian intelligence, and they study where Russian coverage is on given times. They study gaps in this coverage, and then they seek to exploit these gaps by bringing material in and then moving it in a way that avoids coverage, avoids interdiction. You know, it's not just about being detected, it's about response time too. So, you know, anybody who has a knowledge of the of intelligence knows that I can take a satellite photo, but that photo has to be looked at by an analyst. That analyst has to assess what's going on, write a report or give a report, and then that report has to be approved by a commander, and then only then is it turned over to targeters who now look at what the intelligence says and to determine what resources can be brought to bear on this. Now, you can shorten that system by having units that are standing by to respond to intelligence input. But even then, there's a delay. And so if I'm studying the Russians, I know that from the moment of detection to the moment of reaction, there's a period of time. So I will always be seeking to change my location, move my location to disrupt Russian targeting. If you stay in one place too long, you die. And the CIA knows this, the JSOC guys know. People keep saying, how do the Russians get, why do the Russians allow this equipment to go to the front? Russia's not allowing anything. Targeting is very difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult, especially in a nation as big as Ukraine with the resources, and especially when you have the resources of the United States brought to bear to create a counter Russian targeting potential into logistics. So, and I'll say this about the U.S. personnel that are involved. They're very good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. They project to the future. They always have options. And so they can adapt. It's not as though they've bought into a rigid system that is incapable of adapting once Russia changes battlefield realities. So I think that the Ukrainians, it's going to become more and more difficult for Ukraine to fight this war logistically, but I think that there will be logistical continuity and logistical competency up until the very end. Let me put it this way. If you study the German military in World War II, and especially in the final days of the war, they retained command and control, and they retained logistics continuity. They ran out of gas before they ran out of the means to distribute gas. They had a system in place to support the units. They still lost. I think Ukraine will retain a logistics system capable of supporting units up until the very end. that this war isn't going to be won by Russia by eliminating logistical supportability. They're going to make it tough. They're going to make it dangerous. They're going to make it hazardous. But in the end, I think the Ukrainians and their U.S. and NATO allies have built a very capable logistic support network that has survivability built into it. And it's going to be a very difficult target for the Russians to eliminate. And I don't believe that they'll ever completely eliminate it.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you, Scott. Definitely, there is a very well built system, redundant system of supplies. The other thing is the sheer number, for instance, of ammunition that is necessary for the front. Imagine that Russia is shooting 50,000 rounds per day, and Ukraine is responding with the 5,000-6,000. Even that 5,000-6,000, it's sometimes it's nightmare to build it because you need to produce that stuff.
Yep.
I remember in Afghanistan, we had a M777, and I read one manual, and it says that maximum 100 rounds per day in the heavy engagement. Maximum 100 rounds per day. And Ukrainian crews, they're finding 1,000 per day. Wear and tear on equipment, usage of ammunition. It's supplies of that stuff just to bring the stuff to the battery. Just imagine one battery, how much stuff they need. And Russia, they developed that since the World War II because with the sheer firepower and the quantities of shells. See, Stalin once said the quantity is a quality of in itself. So Russia will, with the sheer firepower, the number of shells, maybe they have some systems which are not precise, but they are closing that gap with the guided ammunition, for instance, for Smerch, BM30. But the sheer firepower, they have that. They have supplies, unlimited supplies, basically. So the quantity of stuff that Russia can dump on Ukrainians is 10 times bigger than Ukrainians can respond with all supplies from the West. Now I know that Canada, for instance, here we don't have our artillery here. Our quantities are maybe for one day. We can sustain one day fire because everything was shipped to Ukraine. Now Canada is paying South Korea to produce 155 mil shells, and the quantities per day that they can produce, Ukraine can fire within an hour. Okay. So that is something that is not working for the Ukrainian side. The chain, how that stuff can be delivered to the units, it will stay. It will be degraded here and there, but what they will have, what will be available to deliver to that unit is a question, because this is attrition. This is pure war of attrition. Grinding material and people.
Yeah. No, I agree. Unfortunately, Alex, I'm at my I'm at my turn into a pumpkin mode. We've reached an hour and I've got to go, but this is a great conversation, one that I'd like to continue. So if you wanted to reschedule and we could continue this conversation, that would be fantastic.
Yes, of course.
I agree.
It would be an honor, yeah, of course. So we can end it here. I will make a new appointment. Thank you both for this interview. We will put for the watchers. We will put the books of both of you in the description box of YouTube. You can take a look there. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and yeah, see you soon again.
Okay, thank you. Happy New Year, guys.
Okay.
Pleasure meeting you, Mike.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.